Right. Hello, Shirley Peters here. Well, I've picked a day today. It is so hot here in Sydney. It is nearly, I think it's 36 degrees, and which is Celsius, and probably in the high 90s Fahrenheit. It's only mid-spring, so who's to know what summer's going to hold? My studio's not air conditioned, but it is fairly cool, so I'm not complaining. It's very hot outside though. And therefore, and also there's clouds coming over. So sometimes if you see this video go light, dark, I've got bright skylights above me, and if the clouds come over, then it all darkens. So that's the excuse. Now, I think I'm too low, excuse me. I've got this studio chair here that goes up and down. It's old, but it's beloved. I can make it come up a little bit. That's better. Now I might just fix the camera. Hang on. And that means I have to take you up a little bit more, like that. Right. Now, there's one other thing a couple of things I need to tell you about. One is we have really bad internet here in where we live, 50 kilometres outside Sydney, up in the beginning of the Blue Mountains, up over a couple of hills, and we have no landline as far as the internet goes, so it's all come through Wi-Fi. And if the people in the area, everyone gets on their games or whatever they're doing, we have no internet service for quite large periods of time. So I can spend a whole day uploading one of these videos because it just doesn't happen. It just sits there, 27%. And then an hour later I come past 29%. It's very slow. So then if I get it uploaded and I find there's an error or something in it that's just wrong, I've got to start all over again. And so that's one problem. I can't do videos faster than I'm doing them at the moment, which is about one a week, because it takes me a couple of days to film and then do the edit and then upload it, and then in between I get lots of interruptions because we're renovating the house, and that means my hubby needs a hand every now and then too. So that's my other excuse. And also, so I'll just get straight into it, sorry, wasting your time. I'm going to paint this painting. I think you can see it there quite well. It's a beautiful beachscape, I'd call that. And I've done it before as an oil painting, and I called it Gems on the Beach, so I'll probably call it the same for this one. So there's a history to it. And that history, I haven't done it in watercolour, so this will be an interesting exercise. Now, same old paints that I've got, which are listed below, so have a look at those. And once again, I'm using the Arches, and it's called, I went to all that trouble 2 days ago to do those cards, and we compared rough, medium and smooth. And now this one here is cold pressed, which is roughish. So I don't know if it's medium, but cold pressed. I have a feeling this is rough, and I think the one that's called Knot is medium, and then hot pressed is smooth. So that's it. Put that away. I'll turn the camera around and I'll get stuck straight in. That gives me room to put the original painting there, so you can see it, and you can also see the colour choices I make on my palette. And yeah, so let's get going. I'm going to start with a very quick sketch. It's not really much to write home about. It's just being a little bit of a guide for me. Just a guide for proportions, really. And I think I'm going to be a little bit creative, I guess you could call it, with the layout of this. in so much as I won't put all those rocks in, I'm just going to make it up. So there's the hill behind, there's the sand comes out and then comes down to a nice rock there, another rock there, rock there, rock there, one on the sand, another one on the sand, and there's got the shadows coming out. Shadows will be the one good thing. There's a little bit of darkness there. I might just try and put that, not worry about that. This rock goes a bit, this one comes higher, so I'll make that rock bigger. And there's a gap, and then the next rock here, right, a gap. Those gaps are fairly important because you can put nice wave shapes through there. And then I might just have that rock come down to the bottom, I think. Although that's lovely. Probably haven't left myself enough room, so I think I might take that rock out or move it back a bit. So this is where a little bit of a pencil sketch gives you some ideas before you start, just in case you, like that, realise you're going to make an error by changing. So that gives that lovely flow through of that water. I'm going to try and capture that. I'm going to try and leave as much as I can of the foam in white, so that now make sure you do fat at the front and then really fine at the back to give that feeling that it's going a long way away. I won't draw in any of those details in the water because you'll see the pencil marks, and I won't draw the white there, but I do want to leave white there. I put a little bit of a mark just so that what happens when my brush comes down to it and I know, oh, stop here, there's something that needs to be done. So I'm using a very big fat mop that I bought from Escoda, and it's a Joseph Zubkovic, which I love the guy, but I can't pronounce his name. Zubkovic. It's one of his brushes. So if you go to Escoda and look online, you'll see that. And I might put a link to that down the bottom. So what I'm doing here is mixing up a quick sky, and the sky has got a little bit of just getting a bit more organised now, so I can tell you what colours they are exactly. Manganese Blue Hue and French Ultramarine in together. The Manganese Blue Hue is a little bit like cerulean, so a little bit greenish. Cerulean's a greeny blue. So to dry brush, it's a dry paper that I'm putting this on. I'm not wetting it first, which is the traditional watercolour way, but I'm just putting it straight in. Wet brush on dry paper. And I'm just putting strong at the top there, and I've got a little bit of purple on my brush there. I don't mind that. Just accidentally got that on. So I'm just going to pull it down, make sure those don't run. There goes the sun. In fact, well, I can't stop this now. I'm going to get up, put the lights on. I'm just putting wetness in here to bring that down to a very pale distance. I've left a few little white specks there, and what I'll do is go back over that with tissue. And I'll find the tissue, so we can walk it up. Here we go. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to dab in, while it's wet, a little bit of tissue there to create a bit of cloud behaviour. Okay. And I'm just going to turn the lights on. I have a bank of beautiful fluorescent lights, medium. They're not white, they're not blue, they're not warm. They're just in the average colour. And I'm just going to quickly stop that little speck from bleeding up there and again there. And I don't mind doing that because that's adding to that cloud look. I might just run that across. There you go, that looks nice. And that's a bit dark there now, so I'll lighten that bit. Right. That's the clouds coming up in the distance. Now, cerulean, French ultramarine blue for my distant water. I don't mind putting that in straight away. It's wet, that's got a wet feel about it, and that means it might run, but I don't mind because it's a distance, and I'm happy for it to be a blurred edge. So I'm just coming down the page with this ultramarine and leaving lots of white areas. And that's what we call dry brush. A little bit, you need to just be careful on the edge that you don't scrub the edge just to fill it in, which I'm guilty of sometimes. Now, I'm just going to run that across very light because I need to put the green colour coming back into it. And with the green, it's a bright green. I don't think I've got the right name for it, but I'll have it down below. Very bright light green in the back here. If you had a teal, this is where you could put all sorts of interesting green. This is where going to the specials desks in arts shops, you could sometimes pick up unusual shades, and sometimes in water like this you do want something different just to make it look interesting. And you could get all sorts of pale greens and teals and interesting bluey green colours. So what I've done is just got a normal, it's almost like a leaf green, and I've just added it to the blue that's already in my palette or on my brush. So I'm just going to come down and thin that out very thin so that it's a very pale colour. Now this colour here is a very, to me it's got blue in it from the sky reflection, but it's also got a darker green, so it's a combination of the green that I used up there, the leafy green, and a little bit more ultramarine blue in with it. So a combination there, slightly darker. I'm just putting in those little wave shapes. They will blend in. I'll probably have to come back over those later. Come around. I'll just go straight into those rock shapes. And providing you leave a fairly dry brush, don't slop the paint on. Keep it as dry as you can there. And I've got the white that I've got to think about. The other thing is we have got a fair bit of the sand colour is a dull grey sand, so it's more like a light burnt umber. So I'm just going to put that in. Makes it interesting, very interesting colour. I'll leave those white. I'll grab some tissues here so I'm constantly sucking out. I don't want any blobs or any runs. I'll take that ultramarine, I'll take the ultramarine and burnt umber combination over to the other side, and it goes a little bit purpley, which I like. So I'm just going to, using my brush the other way around, just make a couple of little indents there for the wash. I'll fix those up in a minute. So I'm just leaving the white in a random way. Going to drag that out, leaving more whites. This end I'll come back the other way with my point facing to the left, and then with a wet brush I'll just smooth that in. Not quite wet enough. And I'll make that go very pale over there, very light. Go. The lighter you go, the better. There we go. Sometimes I need to turn around and come back, especially in this case I want to do that little piece of lace work, the edge of the foam. And I want to get a nice, I guess you'd call it I want my point to go in there and to define that edge. Need more blue in it. Oop. Sometimes these blues, I stab at them because I think I'm looking at the right one and I pick up the wrong blue. Never mind. So there's a little bit of wetness behind that foam as the foam draws back into the water. So just fiddle around like that and then I'll drag that back. Turn it around the other way and just see what I've got. Okay, that'll do. Oh, it's out like that. Wet the brush, take off the moisture and then suck up the outside edge there, like that. And I'll come down to this wider part here, take it right behind this rock. Just the general colour. And I'll take it over to there. So it's almost a little bit purplish. Okay. It's really careless. That's still a little bit damp there, so I'm going to put in some, there's a very dark reflection of that hill. Interestingly enough, it's not at that point where the edge of the cliff is, it's in a little bit. But that said, I'll just pop that in and it will be a nice dark blue colour that I can make up using, tempted to use my usual burnt umber and French ultramarine plus a touch of the carbazole purple, and I'm just going to put that in over here while it's still wet a little bit. It's not really wet, it's just a touch, so I can drag it out like that. And then back the other way, almost to the shore. I think what it is probably seaweed under the ground, as well as the reflection of the mountain. So I'm just going to soften those edges up so that they have a blending. So just water on the brush by itself and just flick it out like that. I'm just touching it in and then moving the brush. That's it. Down here I might just put a couple more. We've got some funny little waves happening down here, so I might take the opportunity with this colour just to show that that's happening. There we go. It doesn't have to be fast, you can do it slowly. Slowly, like that. Okay. That's that dark purple blending through. I'm going to be doing some very fine lines there. Must be a rip, maybe there's a rip, but either way. Water is very forgiving. You can do lots of fun things with it like that. And later I'll come back with some stronger, maybe not. I might brighten this area, but I like to do it in layers. Don't like to get the colour right, or I can't always get the colour right to start with because it dries off. And then you think, no, I want to make that a bit darker, so then we'll come back a bit later on. That said, while I'm in this area, I'm definitely going to add some stronger tones to this blue here. Bring that really strong in there, strong there. And then I'll just start putting in some darker tones here around the rocks. It's sometimes hard to know how to paint water, but often I find if you let your brush flow you let your brush move the way you think the water is going, surprisingly you end up with fairly accurate marks, even though logically you think that's not going to work. So just because I need to come down like a little waterfall coming through there, it's not level, I'll just come down like that and I'll bring it round. I'll dig into my beautiful greens here. I have a beautiful turquoise green, I think it is. It's a turquoisey colour. And I'll put some of that other green just to emphasise the colours. Now I'm going to go right over this area with this beautiful green and come back over it with the blue after. Quite happy to leave those flecks of white. It's actually an exercise in dry brush, I think, this sort of water work. If you can resist going back over it, which I sometimes can't. I'm very hands-on. Okay, I'm going in there with a very dark purple. Yeah, I will do the purple between those two rocks. And because it's wet in wet at the moment, I'm getting some nice edges down there. Nice blurring, flowing things happening. Let's go back up there. Bring that water around. Once again. I'll go right into that. Put some beautiful deep colours there. It's just the beauty of the paints that I choose to use, which is the Daniel Smith. So strong when you want them to be. I'm just going to run those up. While it's wet, just put those in. I might end up regretting that move, that's pretty dramatic, but we'll see how it looks. Now, back to French ultramarine here, just to calm off this crazy bit of seascape work. I'm using the tip of the brush, I'm just putting in a little details, tiny little scoops of pattern that's in the water there. Now I'm going to bring that. Now this shadow water is reflecting light blue, believe it or not. It's very difficult to paint because it goes against logic. You just don't think it's going to be right if you put light blue in. But it's going to be. So I'm going to put the light blue in first, and that's a French ultramarine with whatever else is on the brush at the time. There's some light blue there. Now light blue is going to be down here too, and I'll go around this later with the darker colour. I'm going to put some light blue into these shadows at the back here of these rocks because they're also very wet, it's fresh water, and it's also reflecting the blue sky. So sometimes you just have to be logistical about it, or just use common sense and go, okay, it's going to be reflecting the sky, whether I can see that or not, I'm going to do it, and then we'll work it out later why it doesn't look right if it doesn't look right. But for the time being, all those wet parts, everything that's wet there has got some light blue in it from the sky. Now, trying to manage my water here by using the back one as my first dip and then the front one as my second dip. And I go through tissues like nobody's business. I'm just letting that soften a little bit. And when I say soften, I'm letting the paint dry so that my next brushes will be soft, my next brush strokes. And I'm going to do very dark shadows behind these rocks. And I think I'll use my strong purple because it's so dark, and of my ultramarine, my burnt umber because it's dark, and ultramarine blue at the third. So the combination of those three do give me a lovely dark colour, and I could even just touch it onto that to see that it's on the edge there. Yep, it's definitely going to be dark enough. So I can start somewhere where I want to, which is down the front, purely because, which rock is it? It's this, I'm a bit confused. Oh, that's going to be, that could be water, that could be water. Okay, so it's going to be this rock here. Not brown enough once I start. So I'll take that in. More French ultramarine. In fact, I have got black, a lamp black here, and I'm going to add that in just to try and get a very dense colour. But really the purple is the strongest colour in my palette as far as intensity goes. So just going to rub a little bit of that pattern over the top of that rock to get started on the texture. This one's a dry brush again. Really struggling to mix this dark enough. This is where it was easier in for me in oils, because you can get such a dark colour, and acrylic, whereas you're always fighting in, I find, in watercolour to get it dark enough. I think I've almost run out of my favourite colour, burnt umber. Okay, so I'll bring that round like that. As the rocks go towards the back, they can be a little bit paler. Normally you'd have some sort of a reflection coming up off the sand. I just can't see it in this photo. I just don't know if it's why it didn't reflect back. Probably to do with the angle of the sun, maybe. The angle of the rock sticking up like that. The beauty of rocks is there's nothing too accurate. You don't have to be too... Imagine if these were buildings, I'd be really concentrating on their perspectives. But because they're rocks, it's fun. Just keep going. That's another one that's like that. They're like little stone hinges. This is down the south coast of New South Wales. It's very volcanic, I think is the way you describe it. So now I'm going to mix up. I've got this lovely colour, which is a combination of it's a brown and a little bit of purple mixed with it. So that's going to be burnt umber and purple together. I'm just going to put some of those little shadows on the rocks and where the cracks are. Some are long, some are big, some are small. There. Okay. Now, down to a shadow of these rocks. While they're wet, I'm just going to pull down a shadow like that, like a reflection in that water behind each one, and then with slightly lighter shade, I'm going to redo that shadow there because it's gone too light. Once this dries, I'll be coming back over with things like water and sand. So just getting these shadows in now for the fun of it. Okay, rinse off the brush at the back. Just going to put these rocks behind there. They are actually quite a golden colour, so I'll see if I can clean the brush properly. With a good brush you can actually do the whole painting with it, but we'll see. Whether I need to drop down to a smaller one, I might not have the skills to manipulate this too good, too as well as I'd like. Okay, just coming around now with, I'm going to add blue to this brown because I can see in the distance there, it's ends up being very quite purplish, I guess you could call it. Some rocks in there, cliff faces, shadows. I'm gone for shadow colours, which is the purples and the blues. Using the side of my brush, once again dry, a couple of shadows there, and then very dark here. And to make it very dark I do need to wet that brush up, it's gone too dry, so a wet brush can go in to make some beautiful shadows. And there, a couple of lines across. Now even though that's very purple, I'll be coming back over that with a bit of green. Right now, I think you'll call this green Appetite Genuine. I call it sap green. I think every brand has such different names for green, for their colours, that it's becoming a little bit of a challenge to remember names, especially if you're swapping around different brands. So I'm just fiddling around with that greenery up there at this stage. I'll just put some interesting little tree shapes hanging out into the sky there, and then some solid greens coming down in the light. Letting the brush do half the work. I'm not controlling it, I'm letting it just flop around, and that way it's finding its own little colours, patterns. Just thought to myself, I need another colour here. So while the green is wet, you need to drop in some, say in this case I'm dropping in yellow there to lighten that where the sun is hitting at the back. Oops. Really try and get some real light there. I've got some oranges. You can put orange, you can put cadmium, yellows, all in the green there. Later I'll come along with some dark blue and put shadows in. At this stage I'm just describing what the foliage looks like in the warm afternoon sun. The photograph doesn't do it justice. The photograph makes it look dull and bluish because of the distance. But I'm trying to make the painting a painting rather than a photograph, so that's why it's different. Now I'm running out of water here, so they're both gone a bit dirty. I'll pause and go and get some more water. Just make sure I've got the full. Hello. Now I've got some new water, so I shall continue painting, and I'm just looking around to see that you can see what I'm looking at, which is good. Now, next is to continue the sand, to finish the rocks, sand up here, distance, not too much to do, maybe half hour. I'm just going to use just for the control, for the fun of having a little bit of control for a minute, I'm going to get some blues on my brush here and just run across the back here. There I go, saying I'm going to have control. There's not much control here. Very distant hills. And in reality they have a touch of warmth in them. So there's a little bit of combination of purple and green. A bit more of the green, just for the sake of interest. There we go. Let me think. Okay, I might go to a medium-sized brush down the front. I shall mix up some of this lovely teal blue here and see what I've got. I'll just hold it up to see if you've got it in the camera. But it's a little blue that I keep dabbing into with many other colours, so I'm not familiar with what its true qualities are, but I'm beginning to see it now when I mix it out into the centre there. It's a lovely teal, and I'm thinking I might be able to make use of this. Yeah, that's gorgeous. Okay, so it's strong too, so it didn't look so strong there, but it's certainly strong on the page. So I'm going to just tap that in there and make sure I don't leave it hanging. I'm going to make sure I run it through, and I will also use it up back here. It's gorgeous. I've often used it for adding on into other colours, but not very often do I get to use it on its own, because there's not much in landscape that is that colour other than the sea. So I'll just come down there a little bit. I shall just add a touch into that, yet to do that part. And this bit at the back here. Oh, beautiful. Okay, and that's, I'll run that up there. So, see, when you've got good materials, you've got good paints, you've got good brushes, and good paper. It's a combination that makes life so much easier when you're trying to paint. You can't really blame your tools if you've got the right tools. Okay. Just for the fun of it, I'm just going to run a little bit of that up there. Such a pretty colour, it's worth having it spread around. Okay. The back here, in my photo I've got a rock, but in reality I've got more water, so I need to continue the water down here in a very interesting way. So I'm going to put a dark purple. I'm hoping you can see that right in the corner there. I might even swivel across. I might mess up my videoing. I'll just swivel over here so you can see what I'm doing. Purples. They will fade out, but they're good shadowy colours. I'll wash my brush and I'll add that teal because the teal is matching in its intensity. Now, just going to put a couple of rings around some rocks like that. And then I'm going to start doing little busy, short, curvy pieces of water like that. It's hard to describe. It's hard to see what it is. It's hard to describe what it is. But this is the way I go about that type of busy activity in the water. Is I'll just put little dabs here and there. Okay, I'll leave those to dry because I'll be coming back over that shortly. Really light blue. I don't know if you can see that. Look how light blue that is there. That's the straight up, looking straight at the sky. So I'll just see what I can get there. Hopefully that'll stay blue. You never know. And for the sake of it, while I'm doing that, I'll just do these others too. It's the third time I've got over those shadows. This is a bit naughty. I should get it right the first time. Now, I'm going to come around this sandy area with the burnt umber. I've got to blend it into the back there. I know there's a shadow, but I just want to find a spot. Okay, I'll start down here, find a spot where there's no edge to worry about. I mean, you can, like it's the edge of the sand, and then work back up. And by the time you get to the top, you'll be able to blend it back into some shadowy parts there. So this is burnt umber with a tiny bit of purple in it. I was actually, I bought it by mistake. I just wanted plain burnt umber. Okay, so just go like that. Now, oh, back into the blue, that's a bit naughty. Anyway, I won't worry about that. Shadow. Pretend it's wet sand. Go over the top of that rock. Deal with that later. Side of the brush business. Okay. Now while I'm at that sand, I need to continue it, believe it or not, down here and into the water. So this is where it's going to be interesting. I can see straight through at that sand below, so I'm going to paint it through and see what happens. I'm going to go to the larger brush. I'm not going to go pale, I'm going to go darker. I'm going to add purple. Oops. Enthusiasm there for the dark brown. Right. There's some more rocks there, I hadn't even noticed them. I might put them in. I'll make a shadow for them anyway, and then I'll add them on top. Okay, now just for the sake of it, I'm going to let that sit there and not, I don't really know what I'm going to do. Ooh, sorry, just bumped the tripod. I don't know what I'll do yet with that, but I'm going to go back to the sand, the yellows in up here, and bring them down. When I say yellows, it's a really difficult colour to work out what that is. If I look at my colour chart, transparent red oxide or burnt tiger's eye. Honestly. So I'm going for, I think it's almost an oxide, how can I call that? A dull yellow colour. Once again, I'll put the names underneath. Now, where to start? Down the bottom. So it blends. And bring it up. I'm going to paint in all the sand, all the way across. It's going to blend, it's going to mix, it's going to do whatever it wants to do. And this is where you go for it and see what happens. One of the rules is to make it paler as you get further away. So I'm just going to run the brush really lightly over the top and allow the dry brush to do its job. Now these need to be knowing how much water to have on your brush, very important. I had too much water then and I brought it in and that washed away some of that underlying burnt umber. And if I just pull out into that area, and pretty much happy with that. A few random things happening here, but that said, I'm going to use burnt umber with a little bit of warmth in it. When I say warmth, I'm adding orange. No, I'll go back. I'll take that orange out. I'm not happy with that orange. It's too bright. I think it's cadmium orange. Just going to add a little bit of warmth, like it's almost like a burnt sienna colour into that. And I'm just putting little stripes there so that it can look like the water's pulling back from it. Up here I might just, for the sake of interest, I'll add some other colours there. It's always interesting to add a second colour to an area. Don't just let one colour sit there happy on its own. No, you disturb it. Put in another colour. Make it disturb it. You know, like, see, that's a disturbance there where I've added a French ultramarine to that existing purple and brown mix. Now down here, I'm going to use my brush while this is half dry. I'm going to just start peeling out some of the lighter colours in this water, like twirling the brush around like that, Clean brush, go into the clean water. So basically what you do here, if you pull it out, you know, I've put a couple of different layers of colour on that. Now I'm pulling it out with the dry brush as much as I can. Sometimes I can't because it's already stained the paper. But if you haven't stained it too much, or if, you can pull bits out like that, just to add interest to what's going on there. And it also to make the eye go, huh? What's that? You sort of want to confuse the eye sometimes. Interestingly enough, there's some blue shadings there. I don't know what that's from. Could be the camera. Oop. I want to go dark on that edge. So the fun thing about these brown colours is that they end up looking like sand regardless of how much you mess it up, and you add little dots at the end. I've got to remember to add my dots, so that makes life a lot easier. Now I'll add shadows, quickly add shadows up to into the foliage area by just loading the brush with French ultramarine, basically. So dark blue, it's not very dark, is it? I'll have to mix it with some burnt umber to really darken it up, because sometimes the blue by itself is fairly weak. Sometimes it's strong and other times, I don't know. All relative to how dark you need it. So just putting some colours in there, some shading. This is where sometimes the heel of the brush. I'll dip into my black just for the sake of trying to get a dark edge on those cliff faces and the rocks. Sometimes it's very nice to add detail from in the distance, even though it's supposed to be very vague. If you can, sometimes alright. And then what you need to do, of course, is blend it in a little bit. So what I'm doing is little lumps, and then thin, and then another lump, and then thin. Don't repeat it too many times, you can only repeat it once really, and you have to change it to a different thing. So that's the rocks out there, but they're not quite finished because you do need to add something else to them. So in this case I'm just digging into my burnt sienna, just throwing a little bit of warmth on top of the rock. A little bit around the cliff face, a dab here and a dab there. What I've just done is I've just put some white gouache on my brush, and I've just come down like this and added it everywhere I thought needed white gouache, which is beautiful foamy stuff. I've ticked up there a bit, and I've scribbled in behind in a few spots here, and I might just dry brush that. When I say dry brush, try and get as much paint off my brush and pull that in a little bit. It doesn't hurt to use fingers. Might just brush that up. Fair bit of white needed here, I think. Sometimes lines help. So what I've done, a few squiggles down here for this water, this section here. It's very hard to define exactly what it is, and I might go over that in a little while with some darker. What happens is you get shade and you get light of whatever's behind, so it's a little bit confusing. Now that's it. Just want to put a little bit more detail up here in this water to bring it down, just to try and show that it's like that. Yeah. Okay, that noise you heard, that's awful annoying noise, was my finger rubbing over the paper, and I'm trying to stop it, and I think I'll have to buy a whole new microphone setup. It's very annoying. Now, the lovely thing here is happening is that there's some vertical reflections of this. I'll get a very dry brush. Vertical reflections of the foam coming down there. I don't know if that's going to work or not. It's the sort of thing I put in thinking, who knows? I really don't know if it's going to work. And there's a pencil mark there that I want to get rid of, so I'll just put some white stripes down like that. Actually, I don't like those white; they're a bit too obvious. So I'll come back over them with the ochre. And just fill those in, blend them off. While I've got the ochre, I'm just going to add. I just feel like I need a little bit of warmth on the front of this stonework. There we go. Okay, so I need more gouache around this. I really need to make this pretty. There we go. A little bit there. Yep. A few dots going down into the water, that doesn't hurt. Really does look like that. And here's some dots. I was commenting before, which I think when the camera was off, that this photograph has captured some of the water in mid-flight as little droplets up front here, and it just looks gorgeous, so I'm including that in. And there's little waves, these little things happening there. Right. Now, yeah, so a couple of things. I'm going to use the gouache and blue together, which is a total cheat when it comes to watercolour work, just to put in a little bit of the blue on top of these rocks, because they're wet and they're reflecting the sky. So if I don't put that in, I'll feel like I've done the wrong thing. They're just little spots because that rock has got that texture through. Normally I'd be doing flat strokes for the sandstone that we have in Sydney, but these are different. These are different rocks. So they've just got little, oh, blowfly landed on me, little edges. And that one doesn't really have any, it's dry because it's up high, but these lower ones certainly are getting wet. That one, there's one that's totally underwater half the time. Okay, now just the shadow underneath these, I think, just to give your eye, at the moment you look to the distance and that's fine, it's very pale and washed out, and you have this interest in the middle, and then you just need to finish off with some satisfying vision at the front here. So I'll mix a neutral grey colour if I can with what I've got. I think I need to move to my new palette. Next video you see, I think I'll be using my new palette, which I made a couple of videos ago. I showed you how to make up a palette. So what I'm going to do here, this is actually throwing in shadow from stuff that's on the surface. I don't know where the shadow comes from. When the water folds over on itself, sometimes the sun can't get through. That's what I mean. So the shadow is formed by the wave pattern, even though it's very small waves. Now, I won't go too repetitive. I'll start doing some bigger ones down here, round and round, just like this. In here I'm going to come right into this area of shadow and bring that out. Same with, and now that's wrong there. I've just realised I've left that light green colour. That's just so totally wrong. So that's going to come out, and at the same time it's going to be a part of this wave treatment that I'm doing. Now I just continue a few straight lines, and then I might come round. These lines are actually following, allowing your eye to lead out into the interesting parts of the wave pattern. I'll darken that off there too. Way too light at that point. Then I'll just put some shadow lines there. Oh, and the one last thing is the greys. A little bit of dipping into what I've got left of my little purpley area. I'll add a little bit more blue to it actually. And now this should make nice, interesting shadows in amongst that wet gouache. At the moment it's wet. Even if it's not wet, like this part here won't be wet. Just on one side there where the shadow, sort of like the sun's coming from the right, so I'll just put a little bit on the left. And that gives it that three-dimensional effect that you want when you're doing the wash. So just on that side, a few specks there, not going right up there because it's too far away to see. But I can do it here. And I might just stop there, otherwise I'll end up overdoing it. And one more trick I like to do is the deep shadow that forms. It's so small you hardly see it, but it is there, and it's nice to put a tiny bit of an edge against the foam on the sand side. So just where the sand is, here and there, to show that there's a bit of a shadow forming. Oops. If you end up doing it too deep like that, I'll come back and take it out. Just tiny little detail there that just adds to the feeling of three-dimensionality of the foam. Just pull it out like that. Where is it there? I'll just come back into that gouache, soften that up. I'll soften that up too. But the beauty of gouache is it actually wets up again. So it's like poster paint basically. So you can come back in with a wet brush, do what I'm doing there, and just softening the top edges, just merging it in a little bit, and that gives you the lovely three-dimensionality, if that's a word. There we go. I usually say, finished. I haven't put those rocks in, but you know what? Kind of like what happened there with the sand, so I'm going to leave that. I can do a bit more satisfying detail in the distance by getting a dark blue brown colour to make some branches, because I can see there's lots of very fine branches going up into the sky. Oh well, they're trunks probably, and then down here there's always a little branch going out by itself on Australian bush. Can't see any there on that. They're there, they're just a long way away, so they can't see them. And then just holding up those few little dead trees at the front. Can't cope with the weather. Put some down the side here too. If I was really doing a detailed study of this headland, I could have some fun with the light on the side of those trunks, but I won't do that. It's way too much detail for a distant view. I'll just load up with black because I'm just finishing off, so I just. Okay, half closed eyes, look for some detail that might need some help with. I think at this stage I could keep fiddling forever, but I won't. I'll just say that's done. So I'll hold it up. Thank you for watching. Oh, I don't know. A bit worried about that. Can you see it all? As usual. I need a photographer. There we go. Now, I'll just come in close so you can see some of the detail. Sometimes this helps because from a distance there you can't always see it. So some of the rocks. They kind of get that lovely three-dimensional look from the light that's in that shadow. There's water. More rocks. Beautiful green colours from the paint manufacturers. Okay, so I'll just turn you round. Oh dear. I'll just try and get a long view. Still sunlight. So thanks very much for watching, and I hope you learned a little bit of how to do a beachscape. Especially if you're doing it from a photograph, a lot easier than plein air sitting at the beach. But that said, oh my gosh, what good training it is to go out on the sand and do a few sketches of the water while you're watching it. It's brilliant. And then take the photos and then come home and you've got the whole experience. Good fun. Okay, so thanks for watching this one. If you liked it, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I'll catch up with you next time.